Our next presentation is Getting Social, Creating the Fan Engagement Strategy. And we're fortunate to have with us today Katie Rose Teesdale. Katie comes to us from Villanova University. You see, this is a very collaborative Philadelphia University Community Conference, and seriously. And that's one of the things about sports is I think everybody in the business loves it so much that it's a very collaborative industry to begin with. Katie is the coordinator of interactive media at Villanova, and this role or responsibilities include managing all of the fan engagement and social media strategy and activation for 22 varsity sports, as well as digital marketing efforts. Prior to Villanova, she has held several marketing and advertising roles for clients such as Ford, Porsche, Yum Brands, as well as having served in sports marketing functions at the Philadelphia Eagles. Katie graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from Columbia University and earned an MBA marketing with concentration in sports management from the Fox School of Business at Temple. She's an active member of the National Association of Collegiate Women's Athletic Administrators, a sports management advisory board member at Widener University, and perhaps most impressively sits on the Hall of Fame Committee for the Special Olympics of Pennsylvania. Katie is going to talk to us about a review how social media provides tools for collegiate athletic departments to engage with a variety of key stakeholders, fans, student athletes, donors, importantly, and alumni. And in addressing this opportunity and the challenges that come along with it, she'll address key concepts and best practices for creating and executing an effective fan engagement strategy. So please join me in welcoming Katie Rose Teesdale.
Hello, thanks for having me here today. I just wanted to give a very brief background. I started out in sports marketing, as was mentioned, at the Philadelphia Eagles, and that was really my first kind of foray into the sports marketing world and kind of what piqued my interest in eventually coming back to collegiate athletics. I had a variety of positions in advertising and marketing, and one of the things that it really gave me the ability to do, regardless of the client or the agency that I was working with or working for, was really to stay enmeshed in the sports marketing world and utilize some practices and principles to be able to activate around sports marketing. And I think that's eventually one of the things that led me back to the collegiate athletic space. I was fortunate enough to play sports at college, and so it's one of the things I've always had a passion for. And so in January of this year, I was invited to join the athletics department, and this is actually a fairly newly created position. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today are really what our department is doing in terms of forward thinking and just developing strategy, seeing what avenues are out there for us. Obviously coming in the middle of our winter sports season, it's kind of difficult to start throwing programs together when we've already kind of been through half of our sports that have been competing. So one of the things that we're going to focus on now in our off season over this summer is, as I said, kind of evaluating, what avenues and opportunities there are for us, and then putting those into play in the coming months for the next season. So one of the things that has been a challenge, particularly in my role, being in charge of social media, is kind of where does this fit in the overall structure of the department? What are the roles and responsibilities of somebody in this type of role? I'm really very fortunate because I'm kind of creating my own roadmap, and that's a great thing. You can really kind of carve out your niche and figure out, where you can be of value and how you can kind of fit into the already existing structure and build upon it. So I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about how we approach things at Villanova and how that may differ at different size institutions, and kind of, what challenges that may pose for people trying to figure out how do we approach social media, whose job is it? And then risk tolerance is kind of a key thing that has been an ongoing trend, obviously, with, in recent times. You guys are obviously very familiar with what went on at Notre Dame and some of the things when you're dealing with student athletes and the use of social media, and how as a university and as an athletics department, you have to be very wary of what is your risk tolerance. What are we able what are we comfortable with putting out there, messaging, what are we comfortable allowing our student athletes to message on our behalf, because there obviously are risks involved in doing that and kind of loosening the reins, so to speak. So one of the things when you're developing your strategy that you need to think about is where are we kind of on that, on that scale. And then once you've kind of determined where as a group you want to go, then obviously having some strategic objectives that you can then apply your strategy to and be able to know if it's working and how to optimize it. And then certainly some best practices that we've been able to kind of cultivate so far and we'll look to grow upon in the future. So I'll just start very briefly with kind of the structure of our athletics department. Obviously, we have an athletics director who oversees all the departmental operations and works very closely, obviously, with our university leadership. And then we have a number of associate and assistant ADs who serve different functions within their individual departments, all of which oversee they have their own sport administrative duties, as well as having to serve on various championship and conference committees, both for the Big East as well as the NCAA. So this is just kind of a smattering of, our leadership, and then you'll see the overall breakdown of all of the departments that we have within the athletic department. From intramurals and recreation to the external operations department, which is the department that I'm a part of, facilities and operations, business ops, development. We have our sponsorship, sales, and activation group, equipment, academic support. You can see there's a variety of roles, each with a number of staff necessary to kind of oversee the day-to-day operations. And when you really start to break it down and think about where could social media that role fit in, it really makes sense to look at the two main communications departments, which obviously are our media relations team, and then external ops, which is where I live. Within our department, we have various functions that kind of all filter up into that one broad-based function. We have all of our marketing, branding, licensing, our ticket management, myself, our video production folks, and then a slew of interns who really do all the work for us and keep things moving. And then we have our media relations staff, which have responsibility over all of our 22 sports, as well as public relations responsibilities. So as an athletic department, when you really think about where does this person kind of fit and what role could they play, this is really the two areas where you're probably going to see the most overlap. So, as I said, these are the two groups that really have the most interaction with the fan community. From a media relations perspective, obviously they're generating a lot of content. They're creating the stories that our fans want to see. It's all of the accomplishments of our athletes and our programs, what they've done, where they're going. News about conference realignment has been a huge trend in collegiate athletics, with universities moving in and out of conferences and changing alignments and what that does to longstanding rivalries and things like that. So fans are aching for more and more information and content, and this is where these two groups kind of really overlap with one another in terms of keeping the programs top of mind with our fan community, and then obviously giving them any value add that we can around those programs. So, in short, it's really because it is a two-way channel, and it's not simply about advertising or marketing or pushing. It really becomes the responsibility of everyone who serves a role in engaging with the fan community. It's everyone's job. At the end of the day, you are going to have one person who's kind of responsible for posting the content and managing the content, but when you really sit down and think about your strategy and how you're going to come up with that content, it really is a shared responsibility. we at Villanova have obviously determined that it makes the most sense for us within our structure to live in the marketing department. So that's where I am. And the next thing I wanted to really touch on is, again, this idea of risk tolerance. So one of the things with our administrators that we've been talking about recently is what the comfort level is with, as I said, bringing student athletes kind of into the fold and maybe utilizing them as our brand ambassadors. Even within our department, we have various coaches who are very active in social media, who may tweet from personal accounts, both things going on in their personal lives, professional lives. They also use it as a recruiting tool. And they have various degrees of comfort level with how they engage with their own players. And when you're getting into areas of NCAA compliance and things, it can be a risk. So as a group, we need to kind of, determine where do we fit on that pendulum, and where do we really see ourselves, and what's going to align most closely with what the athletic department's mission and values are. And I think once you're able to kind of clearly define that, it will allow you to start shaping your strategy moving forward. So on one end of the spectrum, obviously there's pros and cons to both. And as I said, it really comes down to what your values and missions are. For those that may tend to feel a little bit more risk averse, there's obviously some pros to that strategy. You have a greater control over your content, so you're not worried that, a student athlete may be upset after a game and wants to go tweet about how, the ref really screwed up that last call and that's why we lost the game. So, you have less potential for those types of instances to potentially happen and maybe paint a negative picture. The PR crises, as I mentioned earlier in reference to Notre Dame, and then tone really is a big thing, particularly when you have more than one person messaging on behalf of the department. Really being able to kind of stay with a consistent feel and messaging is obviously easier when you kind of pull it together and you're able to police it more. And then on the other end of the spectrum is there's been many universities and athletics departments that have been a little bit more on the kind of cutting edge of bringing student athletes in and letting them kind of lead the charge. One of the big benefits to that, obviously, is you speak the language of your classmates, of the greater university community. You know what your friends, your classmates are interested in, what they're talking about, and so being able to really engage with them and get them a part of wanting to follow your program and support you from a fan perspective could, as I said, high risk, high reward. It could be a very rewarding strategy if that pays off. In the end, really, though, it just comes down to preserving that level of equity that is so critical when you're dealing with multiple varsity sports. You have men's sports, women's sports, you have those sports that are driving revenue, you have those that do not. And so really the critical thing that every department needs to deal with is, how do we maintain that level of equity so that we're messaging on behalf of all of our student athletes and really providing kind of a broad-based coverage for all of our sports. So just talking a little bit about how social media kind of fits into the overall fan experience without getting into this eyesore of a graphic. This is really just meant to illustrate the fact that there are so many channels that are available to people now in terms of networking, and not everything works for you. One of the things that you really need to think about, particularly in college athletics, is which one or ones of avenues are most relevant for us. And for us, it really just came down to thinking about how we connect most closely with our key stakeholders. Obviously, driving revenue is a key thing. So that's going to be one of the ways that we measure engagement and we measure how well we're doing with our fan base. Donors are another big area where we can really tie back what we're doing to a key metric. But beyond that, there's all of these other stakeholders that are involved in messaging within our community that we really want to be able to bring our messaging to life and tell this community who we are, but also who we're not. And so social is really a way to kind of connect all of these folks. And like I said, you need to determine, most importantly, what tools are going to allow you to do that. You don't need to play in every space. So, for us, we've really focused on some of the key social networking tools that really allow us to kind of bring that live event experience, and then also pre and post event, kind of keeping that buzz and allowing our fans to engage with us. A lot of the questions that I get from our coaching staff, from our administrators who may not be as active in the social space is, thinking about it more as a one-way channel, thinking of it more as just pushing out. And that's one of the things that you really need to challenge yourself in thinking about, is that it is so many more things. It is a CRM tool. It is a way for your fans to tell you that they had a great experience or that they had a not so great experience. And so keeping that top of mind when you're developing your strategy is really the key thing. And for me and for us, that work in the athletics department, it's really about giving our fans a chance to connect with our student athletes, because much like in the professional space where those VIP kind of experiences, those behind the scenes locker room, that exists at the collegiate level as well. Fans don't often get the chance to be at Madison Square Garden for the Big East tournament, and so kind of seeing those images and those behind the scenes kind of exclusive content is really a way for us to bring those two groups together. So, a lot of the things that we need to focus on really is how are we going to utilize these tools to kind of answer some of the key questions. And I think for us, following a very simple strategy of in the infancy stages, obviously, finding where our fans are and what within the Villanova athletics world is important to them, what they're talking about, listening to them, and then ultimately getting to the point where we're engaging and leading. I think oftentimes brands in general, not just college athletics groups, may want to just kind of jump right in. Let's put this promotion together. Let's just push it out, and maybe don't take the time in the upfront to really let the conversation grow organically. And that's one of the things I think that we're really focusing on right now is, we don't need to promote every single thing that we're putting out there. Let's just kind of let virality, run its course and see what the fans, are putting an emphasis on. So of course we have some strategic objectives that are going to kind of help us, carry out the strategy. And for us, we really focus on three main. Increasing our overall fan base is an obvious one. Improving our brand reputation and social media ranking. That's something that I'll talk about in a little bit with tools that we have available to allow us to kind of make more apples to apples comparisons. So, we may never get 1 million fans on our Villanova Athletics Facebook page, but is that realistic? Is that a realistic goal? And is that something that we should be striving for? And how can we kind of, compare ourselves to other groups within the college athletics space and how we're doing? And then obviously as a revenue driver for our ticketed sports, how we use social to really kind of advance those goals. So like I said, for us, just being realistic by the numbers. This is just a quick snapshot of where we are with some of our social networking in terms of fan following. But as a group, deciding what do we think is a legitimate goal? Where do we think we can be, and how quickly do we think we can get there? And then trying to really marry up your strategy with how you're going to realistically achieve those numbers, and not really, trying to be something that we're not. Clout is actually a great tool that I've found that I think really, like I said, kind of gives that apples to apples comparison in terms of allowing you to look at your influence in the social media space. So it takes a pretty complex index of your presence and your influence and your followers in various social media outlets, and it kind of assigns a number that represents your ranking, so to speak, for lack of a better word. So For someone like Notre Dame that I mentioned earlier, or even Nike as a global brand, with a 92 score, it allows you to kind of rank yourself not by pure numbers, but more, more of an index, I guess, so to speak, so that it gives you an idea of where we are and if we're moving in the right direction. Revenue, obviously, beyond just ticket sales, there's other areas within the event experience that we can start to see positive upticks, such as concessions. All Access is our video product that we allow all of our fans to buy a subscription and be able to see our live events if they can't be at the stadium. So that's another way that we're able to drive significant revenue. And then how we use our channels. So as I mentioned earlier, photos, there's some of the key content areas that really give fans that kind of exclusive behind the scenes experience. So different channels and ways that we can use them, live action, so providing them with stats and scores so that they can follow wherever they are, certainly in the stadium, but also if they're not able to be with us for the contest. Offers, updates, it's such an easy way for us to quickly connect with our fan base when we have things that often, changing on the fly. So it's, as a communication tool, it's great. And then bringing all of these avenues together, I think, is really what has allowed us to kind of, put the strategy into motion. As I mentioned, in-game updates. These are just some examples of ways that both our department as well as other college athletics departments have utilized some of these. So, like I said, we're going to be looking at how we can put these into play moving forward. Keeping fans engaged over the course of the contest, that's a big thing for us, really, is, oftentimes if you're not able to follow along, you just want to be able to get a quick score or see who's winning, and this is a great way to do that. Twitter has really allowed people to connect with the live event experience beyond the pure broadcast. Ticket apps and promotions is another great way for us to be able to utilize the social space. Licensed gear, there's a ton of vendors out there that have actually been able to create their own following within Facebook of purely dedicated to gear, and it's as much or as little as you want to dedicate to it, but all of these avenues are out there for us to be able to activate additionally. And then incentives. Obviously, one of the things that is really going to drive action is giving your fan base, that carrot. So if if you're looking for them to sign up or purchase tickets early, giving them some sort of a discount, some kind of an exclusive experience or signed merchandise or something that will allow them to take action. The social space is really a great way to kind of put that together. Photos is a big thing, and I think one of the things that we're going to be looking to in the future try to cull back. I mean, social has allowed people to kind of go off in various channels, and ultimately I think finding ways to kind of bring all of those folks back into one forum so that you don't have people looking for you on Twitter and Instagram and maybe needing to check the YouTube feed so they can see what video content you've been posting. So giving them kind of this space that aggregates it back on your website and allows them to spend more time on your website, I think, is one of the things that is really going to allow us to kind of maximize all of this buzz and engagement and really utilize it moving forward. Branding elements obviously is a big piece of the photo element, because you're really able to kind of lead your audience with, what do we want you to message? What's kind of a major theme or campaign, either of a sport or the overall athletics department, that we kind of want you to be utilizing in your messaging strategy. And then finally, social rewards is a really big piece that we haven't been able to experiment yet with, but a lot of universities have had success with being able to kind of take the idea of attendance and engagement at the event, and then bringing it back to additional benefits that our fans can kind of bring that competition element into it. I'm just going to skip through for the sake of time quickly to the best practices. Less is often more. This is actually one of the things that we've noticed just in the first few months here with particularly in the phases where we've wrapped seasons, so going from fall to the winter sports and then winter to spring, where we have a lot of our teams competing at the same time. Our fans don't necessarily need to see every single score, every single stat for 5 teams that may all be competing at the same time. So one of the things that we've noticed is that oftentimes when you put too much out there, your fan following may start to drop off a little bit because it's kind of data overload. So finding that delicate balance between what do they need to see to stay engaged and be up with our programs, but maybe not needing to give them the play-by-play updates. And then not assuming that your fans know what action you'd like them to take. So something as simple as asking them to retweet, or as I mentioned earlier, leading them by giving them the hashtag that you'd like them to use when they're tweeting at a game, so that you're kind of giving everyone this commonality when they're putting their messaging together. I mentioned that already. And then just cross-promoting whenever possible with 22 varsity sports, each with their own Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I want to use Villanova Athletics as a way to promote them. So anytime that we can kind of cross-promote is a win for all of us. And then a lot of times in social media, you can kind of get bogged down with, when should we be tweeting? When's the best time to get to get activation and to get engagement? And there's definitely credence to a lot of that data out there, but I think more importantly, particularly in the college athletics space, we have teams that are competing at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. So if data is telling you that that's not the best time to tweet, well, that doesn't really matter, because we need to give our fans what they're looking for when it comes to engaging with our programs. So kind of taking the data with a grain of salt and using it when it makes sense, and then kind of carving out your own niche, I think is one of the key things, particularly for us. And then using data, obviously, to optimize. So the Facebook pages, insights is a great way for you to kind of see trends over time and how you're growing your audience, or maybe how people have, left and come back. And so it's a great way for you to kind of be able to utilize the data to see really what's working. And similarly, on the Twitter side of things, there's so many tools out there that allow you to kind of analyze your activity and see what's working. So for us, this has been a really great way to see, really drill down to the day of week, or just pre and post a big event for us. What things really captured people's attention and what did they want to share with their audience. That's a really big thing. And then finally, with messaging, just being authentic and having fun. It's not necessarily about always having to be rigid and putting together, a campaign, so to speak. A lot of it is just kind of that in the moment, and talking with your fans the way that they're talking with one another. So having fun with it, I think, is a big way of kind of keeping your fans engaged and establishing a tone of voice as well. So understanding, as I said earlier, who you are and who you're not. And also, niche markets is a key thing for us from an athletic department perspective, because there's so many different fans that we could be speaking to, and you don't necessarily need to be speaking to all of these groups at the same time, but understanding, how you're connecting with these groups on an ongoing basis is going to be a really key thing. And then getting back to the whole risk tolerance issue earlier, how are we going to deal with negative comments when we have people that are posting on our Facebook page that, our basketball team stinks and we need to fire our coach. How are we gonna deal with that? How are we gonna message back to that? Are we going to engage with that person? Are we gonna delete it from the page? Having an understanding of how you're gonna deal with the not so great aspects of fan engagement is also a critical thing as well. I thought this image was kind of a good way to just underscore the idea of think before you post. So obviously with live tweeting, with fan engagement, it's often difficult to monitor what you're saying or spell check or grammar, but obviously these things are important. So just making sure that you're getting the message out there quickly, but also in a way that may not necessarily be detrimental to your brand is kind of a critical thing as well. So for us, in conclusion, just some of the tactics that we've been able to put into play. A posting schedule has really allowed us to kind of keep all of this content organized and figure out, which programs we're supporting and how frequent we need those messages to get out there. Focusing on some influential alumni in the social space is a really great way as well for us to kind of keep that conversation going. And finally, coaches and team accounts. That's another thing that I mentioned earlier that I think is a really great way to kind of bring everyone into the fold and, culminate the efforts that all of these different programs are kind of messaging on their own behalf, but, utilizing everyone with a common theme and messaging, I think is going to be a great way for us to kind of really carry our strategy out moving forward. And then educating people. We've had the opportunity to really sit down and talk with our coaches and talk with our administrators about what works and what doesn't work, and provide them the tools so that they can really start to take ownership of it and market their own programs. And I think that's one of the key things of trying to amplify the resources of a small department. So that's all I had.
Thank you very much.